Hello, everyone. This is Mary, and welcome to this week's episode of the podcast. Hopefully, you all are doing well. I appreciate you guys for tuning in to the past episodes of the podcast. Again, I will have linked below all of the links for the appropriate places that you can find the podcast via Linktree. And we'll just get right into the episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark? So this week's episode, I'm going to be talking about Tale of the Super Specs. This one is a little bit different where it opens differently than most of the episodes where we're right at the campfire. This one opens, we see Gary who's using a mini guillotine and he's chopping off one of his fingers. Kristen runs over to him. She's asking if he's okay. He reveals it was a magic trick, and we learn that his dad is the owner of the magic shop, which makes sense for the whole Gary storyline thing. It's actually pretty cool. I wish I owned a magic shop. That would have been pretty cool. And he says that that's where he gets his story inspirations from, which again makes sense because he's all into the magic and the mystical and stuff like that.
So your dad really owns this place?
Yeah, that's where I get all my story ideas. There's all sorts of strange and voodoo and occult stuff in here.
Kristen tells Gary that some of the people in the group thinks that his stories aren't very scary, and she doesn't really say who. She's just like, oh yeah, they don't really think you're very scary.
About your stories, Gary. I shouldn't be telling you this, but some of the guys have been saying that they haven't been too scary lately.
Who said that?
I don't know.
She then pulls up a pair of glasses, and Gary tells her they're super specs. He asks her if she believes in magic, and that he likes to keep an open mind and be ready for surprises.
They give you X-ray vision. Whoa, yowza!
Give me a break.
What's the matter? You don't believe in magic?
Oh, and you do.
Maybe I do, maybe I don't. Sometimes it's best to keep an open mind and be ready for surprises.
The group are at the campfire. Frank is saying how Gary is slipping big time, and Betty Ann is saying nah, she loves Gary's stories. And then you see somebody walking towards the group in the woods, but you can't really tell who it is. And then you hear two voices. One of them's clearly Gary's, and saying not yet. I think that's what he says. And then Kiki says she can't remember the last time Gary scared her, and then all of a sudden she gets freaked out by Gary popping up. Okay, Kiki. Gary tells this group that David can't be there tonight because he's sick, which is a little suspect. Okay, David's sick. But clearly David was the other person in the woods with Gary. I mean, the group doesn't know this, but if you're watching the episode, it's who else would it be? Gary says that his story is about three kinds of people. People who believe in magic, people who don't, and people who should.
Submitted for the approval of the Midnight Society. I call this story The Tale of the Super Specs.
So we see another magic shop, and Gary says how Weeds is super into magic. I don't know if Weeds is a nickname in this situation. That's kind of, again, with the whole, Are You Afraid of the Dark thing where we have some weird names like Ouija and Weeds and stuff, but okay. But Weeds is really into magic. April Fool's Day is approaching, and Weeds is getting ready. He grabs the pouch with the dust of dendron and powdered monkey bones. His girlfriend, it's not really established it's his girlfriend at this point, but it's his girlfriend, MaryBeth, says she thought they were going to go to the movies, and Weeds is like, no, I'm trying to perform magic tricks and spells, and I want to do this. And then MaryBeth and Weeds are dressed really similar to how Kristen and Gary were dressed at the beginning of the episode. MaryBeth is even wearing the same purple bandana in her hair that Kristen was wearing. And then Weeds is wearing a polo shirt like Gary was wearing. I think Gary's was a dark blue and Weeds is purple. So they're pretty similarly dressed. Weeds is looking through a spell book. He finds a spell of second sight, which honestly, instead of the Tale of the Super Specs episode, could have been called the Tale of the Second Sight. I don't know why it wasn't, but it could have been called that. He recites a spell, and he sprinkles some dust in the air. Some of it lands on the super spec glasses that Kristen saw in Gary's dad's magic shop at the beginning of the episode. And then the lenses change color. They kind of change rainbowy. MaryBeth tells Weeds they have been dating for a while now, 2 weeks according to Weeds, and he's not really very mature. All of a sudden, he farts, and he pulls out a whoopee cushion and he's laughing.
I'm beginning to think that you're not very mature.
What makes you say that?
Then a man pops out from behind a curtain. He tells Weeds to buy his stuff or leave. We learn his name is Sardo.
Sardo. No mister. Accent on the toe.
This is one of his first appearances on the show, of many, like Dr. Vink. He's a recurring character. And yeah, it's kind of cool to see. I forgot which episode was his first, so it's nice to see this was his first appearance on the show. Weeds is buying a few things, and he has to stock up for April Fool's Day. He grabs a pair of the glasses, and Sardo tells him he has sold hundreds and thousands of these glasses, which is obviously bullshit, and they can give X-ray vision.
Some say they give you X-ray vision.
Weeds puts them on, looks at MaryBeth, and is like, yowza, like he pretends he can see through her clothes.
Yowza.
Give me a break.
Look, I'll take these two.
She puts the glasses on, and she looks around and sees a dark, like, hooded, cloaked figure, a dark figure, who's one of those people that if you've been to shows where there's, like, the closest thing I can think of is a Disney World at Animal Kingdom, the Finding Nemo show, where it's like kind of a blacklight show and you don't want the performers to be seen. They wear a costume made entirely of black. That's what this is. And this person's standing in the room, and then when she takes off the glasses, they're gone. Weeds is reading a book on voodoo made easy. He smiles mischievously, and then he sprinkles some of the magic dust onto a classmate's yogurt while he was reciting a spell.
Trans. Rama.
He goes to put the yogurt back. He's caught by one of the girls, and one of them is like, oh, why haven't you pulled any pranks on us? Weeds is like, nah, that's for stupid kids, like, stuff. And the other girl with the spiked yogurt says, well, Weeds, you're a stupid kid. Shakes a bite of yogurt, and Weeds is, like, really intensely watching her. She asks what he's looking at. He's disappointed. He says he knew that it was going to be a ripoff. And as soon as he leaves, the girl that was eating the yogurt talks, and she sounds like a chipmunk.
Who knows? He's always... My voice. What's wrong with my voice? I sound like a chipmunk.
There's some kid in his locker. Weeds is wearing the super specs. Weeds starts giggling, and when the kid opens his locker, one of these, like, joke toy hands punch out at him. I don't know. I guess Weeds knows his locker combo because it seems like they're friends, but okay. He asks what the glasses are, and MaryBeth shows up, puts them on, and says that they make you look cool and how, like, they'd have to be, you know, magic to make Weeds look cool. She looks around and sees another dark figure, this time a woman, who's reading a book. Weeds and his buddy think she's pulling a prank on them. Later on, MaryBeth is talking to Weeds, and she says she definitely saw someone, and he's like, nah, you didn't. Like, he just doesn't believe she's telling the truth. He refuses to believe her. He thinks she's pulling, like, a joke on her. She grabs the glasses and sees the same woman standing by a tree. He puts the glasses on, doesn't see anything. She puts them back on. She sees the woman pointing at her. MaryBeth screams, and then she chucks the glasses in the trash.
Hey!
We see Weeds and his buddy. I don't think his buddy's name is ever said in the episode, but they're on the basketball court. They're playing horse. The guy has HORS, so he needs an E. And Weeds takes the magic dust, sprinkles it on the basketball. He recites some sort of spell.
Raja.
Say what?
The next shot, we see the ball has no dust on it, but the shot before, like a second before, the dust is, like, all over the ball. So nice continuity there, but Weeds misses the net, and his friend wins. He owes his friend 2 sodas, I think is what he says. Then Weeds throws the ball behind him and it lands in the net. The guys stop, turn to the net, and are like, nah, they don't believe that Weeds actually like scored a goal. MaryBeth is walking with one of the girls Weeds was trying to prank earlier. It looks like one of the same girls. She seems to believe MaryBeth and says that MaryBeth says that it was probably a prank that Weeds and his friend are pulling on her. She tells the girl that Weeds got her a book on mummies or something for their 1-week anniversary. She goes to get it from her backpack. Not sure why she's carrying it around if she doesn't really like it or she thinks it's weird. And pulls out the super specs instead. She heads back to the magic shop, which is called the Magic Mansion. It's closed, so she puts the glasses inside the mail slot and leaves. MaryBeth is inside her kitchen at her house, which has really nice exposed brick and a fireplace and a really super outdated, super small oven. But the exposed brick is actually really cool. She grabs a cookie from this cat cookie jar and she takes out her books and homework and drops a cookie from her mouth. Inside are the glasses. These things are just like following her. No idea why, because like they're Weeds, so you think like they would follow Weeds, but they're following her. She puts them on the kitchen counter, open and upright, and then the next shot they're folded and laying flat. So another continuity error. This is stuff you notice like now watching the episodes. She puts them on and she notices a brass tea kettle on the stove is boiling water. She removes the glasses and the kettle isn't there. She walks over to the stove and you can hear the kettle whistling, but as soon as she removes the glasses, it stops. The kettle is also slightly see-through when she's wearing the glasses, and she like puts her hand through the air trying to run it through the kettle, and she's like, oh, this is kind of cool. So she looks at the fireplace. It's got a fire burning. She then continues walking through her house, and there's some like funky music playing in the background, so I'll probably insert that. When MaryBeth makes it to one of the bedrooms, she sees the woman with the book again. She asks who the woman is, kind of like yells at her, like, who are you? Turns around, sees 2 more dark figures, and then screams. The 2 figures walk towards her. She removes the glasses, and then she puts them back on, sees the figures, takes the glasses off, and runs out of her house screaming. MaryBeth finds Weeds with his friend and tells them that the specs are making her see things. She puts them on and sees a bunch of figures playing basketball. They stop playing, they stare at her, and they start walking towards her. She screams yet again and runs away. Weeds calls after her. He's like super confused because he doesn't know what's going on. MaryBeth heads back to the Magic Mansion. She tells Sardo it's about the glasses, and he says like, oh, sorry, if they don't work, you're out of luck.
Sorry, no guarantees. If they don't work, that's your never mind.
No, wait, my problem is they do work.
He looks in a big spell book. He finds a spell of Second Sight, and MaryBeth is like, yeah, that's a spell that Weeds performed. She thinks she's seeing ghosts. Sardo tells her she is seeing into another dimension and how the spell must have opened a window to a parallel universe. He tells her the window is probably at her house, but Weeds was the one who performed the spell, and he didn't perform it. He performed it at the magic shop. So why would the portal be at MaryBeth's house? That's like kind of a weird part of this episode, I guess. Shouldn't it be at the magic shop? Sardo says how once the window is open, other beings can cross over into like their dimension and take over.
I don't mean to scare you, but they could take over.
Very, very dangerous, very dangerous.
MaryBeth says he can go to her house and close the window, but Sardo says casting a spell isn't easy. Or sorry, casting a spell is easy, but uncasting it can be tricky. You need an expert who's familiar with counter spells and how to cast them. And, you know, MaryBeth is like, well, do you know how to do that? He says yes, but he has expenses, and he tells her it'll cost her $50. He always does this in, like, episodes that he appears in. He's always like, this thing costs this much, and when the person's like, what? He's like, oh no, actually it's this much, but I'm losing on the deal. So that's what he does here. She doesn't really want to pay $50. He says 20, how he's losing on the deal.
$50?
What?
All right, 20. But I'm losing on the deal.
Okay, I guess.
Good.
He looks for the dust of Dendron and realizes he sold the last pouch tweeds.
The dust of Dendron. I'm out. I had some here. I must have sold the last pouch to your boyfriend.
Weeds has kind of had enough. He thinks this dust is bogus. He's gonna flush it down the toilet. He's not even like dumping the powder out. He's gonna flush the whole pouch, which is really safe for the environment. Not gonna do anything to your toilet or anything. MaryBeth stops him. Sardo is saying some magic words with a crystal ball like Alakazam and a bunch of other stuff.
Alakazam.
Weeds is super skeptical about this whole thing. Understandable. Sardo then recites the second sight spell and starts sprinkling magic dust on the crystal ball.
Alakazam in a crystal ball? Come on, who does he think he's kidding?
Bamba nay.
I am very, very embarrassed for this guy.
The room grows really dark and dim, and there's like some lights in the background going on, and they start floating in the air along with the table. The crystal ball is like full on lit up at this point. They're all super confused what's happening. Sardo admits that he's never done this before, and MaryBeth is like, wait, I thought you were an expert.
I don't know. I've never done this before.
I thought you were the expert.
Sardo tells MaryBeth to put on the specs and tell them what she sees. They are surrounded by figures.
Put on the specs and tell us what you see.
Weeds tells her to take off the specs because they can see the figures too without the glasses. Sardo is like super in disbelief that the spell is actually working here. Then he looks for the spell of the cosmic seal. He performs it, the figures disappear, the room is still black.
Nimbo, Rhombus, Rondo K, Fable, Dinkum, Flux,
The group is happy. They're like, yay, we did it. But then these two giant brown eyes appear behind Sardo, and he's like, take the children, and just like ducks down under the table.
Take the children!
The eyes tell them they've tampered with the cosmic seal and two universes cannot exist on the same plane, and that balance must be restored. And then the eyes start reciting a spell and disappears. Wind starts like super blowing towards like all of them, and MaryBeth yells. And then we're back at MaryBeth's house. Well, we were already there, but things look normal at her house. Two kids show up that look exactly like MaryBeth and Weeds, and they're like, we did it. And they close the window, and I think one of their names is Arlene. It's really hard to tell because the closed captioning said Darling, but I think the woman says Arlene. Arlene asks if the ghosts are gone, and the woman in black says there weren't any ghosts. There was a window to a parallel universe, and she closed the window.
I closed the window.
And she tells them that they were trying to get rid of them too. She tells the boy how they won't be bothering them anymore, looks into her crystal ball, sees MaryBeth, Weeds, and Sardo begging for help, and she's cackling. Gary tells the group how the two universes were battling each other, but the woman in black won because she was actually like a powerful sorceress or a powerful witch, and Sardo's a phony.
Exactly. Because the woman in black was powerful, and Sardo was a fake.
He grabs his backpack. He tells them he's late because he brought super specs for everyone. He tells them to put them on and count to 3, or when he counts to 3. Everybody sees a dark figure standing behind Gary. They scream, run away. Kristen removes her glasses and tells Gary she guesses his story was scary enough. David removes a black mask from his face, and the 3 laugh, saying April Fools, and they kind of celebrate. And that is how the episode ends. So definitely one of the darker episode endings of the show. It's like the 2, well, I guess Sardo's included, but Weeds and MaryBeth, who are her like kind of heroes of the story, end up being put in this crystal ball and I guess no longer really existing in the world. I don't know. It's definitely a weird ending for sure. There's no happy ending like some of the episodes have, but yeah, I like this episode. I know it's ranked as one of the higher episodes of the show, but it's definitely not it's not in my favorites list of episodes, but I do actually really like it. I think it's a good episode, and we get to see Sardo for the first time, so there we go. I'm not sure if the other episodes he appears in are all Gary's stories or not. I don't know. But anyways, we have the cast. Eugene Bird, who I recognized, he's went on to be in a bunch of stuff. He plays Weeds. He was in Ghost Rider, which I watched as a kid. He was also in Sleepers, 8 Mile, Anacondas, The Hunt for the Blood Orchid, which I watched within the last few years, so I remember him being in that. Arrow and Bones are some of the stuff he's been in more recently. Richard M. Dumont, who's Sardo, he was in 8 episodes of the show, including Dark Dragon, Carved Stone, Cutter's Treasure Part 1 and 2, The Door Unlocked, Oblivion, and The Time Trap. I think Oblivion and The Time Trap are from the late 90s, 2000s seasons. He's also done voice work in the Assassin's Creed games, and he's also in an episode of the new Are You for the Dark. I only watched season 1, and he wasn't in that, so he plays Mr. Sardo. So that's kind of cool that he reprises his role. And then Rachel Glate, she's the one in black. I guess she was also in Tale of the Long Ago Locket, but I haven't seen that episode in a while, so I can't confirm. That's what IMDb said. The actress that plays MaryBeth, she wasn't really in much of anything else. I think she had one other acting credit, and that's it. But yeah, that's about it for this week's episode. So hopefully you like it. You can leave some comments below letting me know what you think. If you're listening on a platform besides, or watching on a platform besides YouTube, definitely send me an email. I will have that linked below. The link tree will be below for any Instagram and YouTube and all that stuff. You can find all that stuff in below. But yeah, I do like this episode. I think it's cool that Gary's dad owns a magic shop. I would have liked to have owned a magic shop or known somebody who owned a magic shop when I was a kid. That would be pretty cool. But yeah, it was just funny watching this episode, and I like it. I dig it. It's a good one. It's definitely one that's, I didn't find it necessarily scary, but it dealt with paranormal elements, I guess. So yeah, but again, if you have any questions, comments, anything, feel free to email me or leave them below if you're watching on YouTube. And that's about it. This has been Mary, and thank you for tuning into this week's episode of the Retro Rewatch podcast. I'll talk to you later. Bye, everyone.